Hi, we wanted to share just a little disclaimer for this podcast episode that the views and opinions expressed by your guests on the Lifting Leaders podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts or the podcast team. Additionally, the information shared in this episode is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor or professional before making any financial decisions.
Welcome to Lifting Leaders Podcast, where we're unleashing leader possibilities to make a better world. I'm Tricia Ryan, and together with Crystal Roberts, we're diving deeper into some of the complexities of the world's most critical challenges and exploring innovative ways of navigating through them.
Through interviews with experts and leaders just like you, we are exploring what it takes to thrive as a leader today and examining new ways of thinking about how to creatively lead into a more equitable, socially responsible, and sustainable future. And the future starts now.
Hi, Crystal. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing, Tricia?
I'm doing great. We are in fall.
We're in fall
now.
Yes.
Yay.
The leaves are turning. It's so beautiful here in the Pacific Northwest.
Time to get the pumpkins out, right?
Yes.
I know. I'm so excited. I really want to decorate my house. I love fall, and that's the only season that I really get crazy. And then I get semi-crazy for Christmas. What can I say?
It's the lead into.
Yeah.
It's the lead into it. Yeah.
Hey, I'm really excited about today. You know, we have this multifaceted gem who is going to be our guest today. And I met him at work. And I've had a lot of opportunities to work with him on just, a few initiatives that we're doing internally. And he is truly a gem. And his name is Darrell Thomas. Let me tell you a little bit.
Welcome, Darrell.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Let me tell you a little bit about Darrell. He believes that true leadership is forged through experience. Throughout his expansive career, he has partnered with tribes, school districts, nonprofits, and government agencies to deliver solutions in leadership development, diversity, equity, inclusion, and conflict resolution. Having trained more than 3,000 people, Darrell brings deep expertise in building strong, efficient, and values-driven teams. Beyond leadership development, Darrell is a passionate advocate for closing the racial wealth gap and breaking cycles of generational poverty. Through education, mentorship, and financial literacy initiatives, he works to empower underrepresented communities to build sustainable wealth and economic freedom. Darrell's also a seasoned financial podcaster and media host. He created and hosts the Money Levels show, where he interviews and connects with multimillionaire and billionaire investors. I want to know these people. Business leaders and thought leaders from around the world. He also serves as a host of the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference Media Channel, engaging directly with high-profile investors and executives to discuss trends shaping global markets. Through Savvy Leadership Academy, Darrell combines his dual expertise in leadership development and finance to offer innovative solutions that help leaders grow their influence and impact. His personalized coaching, online programs, and in-person workshops are designed to cultivate the leadership skills and strategic thinking necessary to excel in today's fast-moving business environment, while also inspiring leaders to contribute to a more equitable and financially inclusive future. Welcome, Darrell. That was a big bio, guy. That was great.
Yeah, sometimes the AI just spits out like these big bios.
Well, it's a good bio. You got to use it again. That's wonderful.
It was a mouthful. There's so many big words in there.
Well, and I only read it like 400 times before I did it today. So can you imagine how many edits I might have had earlier?
The AI make us sound smarter than we really are.
I know. Well,
no, I think actually it helps us to tell our truth sometimes, where it can be difficult to talk about ourselves
Yes.
and to to accurately represent, because we think, oh, that sounds too big or whatever. I think it challenges us to really shine as we should.
I like that answer.
Yeah.
Let's use that answer in the future.
I was actually just talking to somebody the other day about putting your bio in AI and having them sort of make it more professional and stuff. And they're like, wow, I can't believe it. And it's like, it's all true. It's all good stuff. It's all real. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing's in there fabricated for sure.
No. Yeah. We got to own it. Yep.
Well, it's
For
not
sure.
smart enough to fabricate yet. It will be, though, someday.
It's just constructing. It's like constructing all of these life pieces, experience, and
Yeah.
like even the bio like isn't even half of like what I do.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
kind of
right.
like
Yep.
Right.
it's
It
like
missed a
okay,
whole, it
which
missed
part
every,
should I talk about in here, and how
Yeah.
do I simplify this or whatnot, or construct it. So yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, very cool. So let's get into the questions, okay? Before we take you a real deep dive with you, tell us your story that's not AI.
Story, not AI. My story, I'm from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Grew up on the east side. Grew up in a traditionally black neighborhood. That was a very, very nice neighborhood. And, and during segregation, like black people were segregated to the east side. And so that's where I grew up. And during the time I grew up, at that time, that was when more gangs were coming down different places. I mean, you had the spread of like, NWA and, gang culture and stuff. And so that ended up, plaguing my neighborhood for a little while. Not so much now, but it's still there. I kind of grew up in that environment. It never really intrigued me. Um, my mom's like raised me in church, and she, taught me, just how to do the right thing. And, while my cousins and family were getting involved in the street life. And so I always had this, guardian angel, just kind of looking over me and, telling me like, wanting like more for me. Like she experienced, just the destruction that's happened in our family, and wanted more for her kids. So I grew up in that environment, and then she moved us to Washington State when I was 13 years old. I was in seventh grade, and at this time she was leaving an abusive marriage. So she got three or four Greyhound tickets, put me, two of my sisters, and herself on the Greyhound. We traveled 3 days to a place far, far away that I knew nothing about. So we came to Washington State, and then we were staying with her friend's son at the time, and grew up here, Bremerton, and went to once I finished high school, moved back to Oklahoma City, and then um, at that time, I was being influenced like I was really influenced by hip hop, so I was doing a lot of hip hop music at the time. I still do hip hop to some extent, not as much as I used to, but and that kind of influenced me in a way to where the type of hip hop I would listen to, I wouldn't blanket all hip hop like this, but the type of hip hop I would listen to really intrigued me with like the street life and stuff. And so I ended up, leaving, the traditional, kind of values and such that my mom taught me to pursue this rap career and start living the street life. I became a drug dealer. I was, just doing all type of stuff in the streets, and ended up finishing school. Went back to Oklahoma City. I felt like I'm tired of Washington. I want to go back to the hood, and so I went. I went back to the hood, and um, you know, was making a lot of destructive choices down there. Went to jail. Um, was just doing all types of stuff, selling drugs and everything, and um, really trying to pursue like this rap dream, you know,
Mm.
and I was really good at it, and I was getting some success, but I started noticing like the things that I should have been prioritizing, the things that were most important to me, I was neglecting, and I was also ultimately like leaving the way that my mother raised me in, and um, so then I had my son around the time I was about 21, 22 years old, and at that time, just life took me down a lot of destructive choices. And then, I had my experience with God, came to faith, um, and decided to change my life. At that time, I was not in my son's life. His mom actually lived up here in Washington after we split up. And so my decision was to come to Washington to be in his life. At that time, I had to go through some court battles and such, and I was just kind of starting over. Like I was working in warehouses, I was um, working little odd jobs. I used to go to Command Center downtown Seattle, where folks are just trying to get daily work, temp jobs, just really trying to make ends meet and, you know, be responsible, take care of child support and such. And was just riding that struggle bus for a while. That ended up
Mm.
um, but at this time, like, I went through a life transformation, so I was living differently. Like I wasn't, doing any of the street like behaviors or anything. I was volunteering. I used to volunteer with like New Horizons, downtown Seattle, working with kids experiencing homelessness. Um, I was doing a lot of performances. I did more positive faith-based hip hop at the time, changed my message up in my music and everything. And then I ended up getting an opportunity. I did not want to come back to Bremerton, and I ended up back in Bremerton
Mm.
and ended up working for an organization called the Coffee Oasis, which I
Oh,
am the vice chair of the board now.
Oh, wonderful.
Um, when I was working there, it's a nonprofit organization that works with kids experiencing homelessness, and so all I had was my story, and I wanted to share that. So I used to go to like the King County Juvenile Detention, share my story, um, perform for the kids, and same thing with in Bremerton, working at Coffee Oasis. I used to do a lot of street outreach. I would hit the streets, go to the woods, see if kids are in the woods, play basketball with kids, put on block parties, start mentorship programs in schools. Um,
Hmm.
I used to teach the PE class in the juvie and
Mm.
stuff, and just really just try to be a positive influence for the kids. And so, like, I felt like I caused a lot of destruction early on in my life, and this was my way of, redemption. And so, during that time, I ended up leaving the Coffee Oasis. I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and so I ended up becoming a juvenile probation officer um,
Wow.
in Jefferson County. So I went up there for 4 years um, and did that work, and that's where I started my journey with restorative justice as well as conflict resolution. And um, and during afterward, we had George Floyd and COVID, so I started facilitating um, circles and mediations and stuff with law enforcement, members of Black Lives Matter, people getting out of incarceration, just like how do we create belonging? How do we create community amongst our differences? And so I was on the kind of front lines, like meeting with police chiefs. Like I made a lot of friends with police
Mm.
chiefs and and such. And so I was doing that work, and then I left the county and went to the Suquamish tribe for about a year and did tribal child welfare. And so was doing that work, and then ended up um, I did that for a year. Ended up at the Port Townsend School District as a director of wellness, where I worked on like school district policy as well as training staff, and just really working to create a more inclusive and equitable environment for the kids. And I did that for about a year and a half before I got to the port. And so So yeah, so then all the finance and stuff happened within all of that, right? So
Wow.
that's kind of like the gist of the story and everything.
Wow. Now, I thought I kind of knew you. I don't think I knew you at all. That's amazing. That's quite a journey. And look
Hmm.
where you are. I mean, to me, you're still on your path, and there's more greatness coming, I'm sure. This is really cool. Thanks for sharing that. I know it's sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable and share all the things that are in our past. And I think they helped they don't define you, but they helped build your foundation, because now
Yeah.
you're doing stuff to help everybody not be in that space, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's awesome.
they help empower you, on your journey,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I think whenever, like for me, like I've shared my story so much, with kids in juvie to, you know, working with police chiefs, and just
Hmm.
like sharing my story. So I'm used to sharing it. Um, and there are parts like where at some points where, I felt like, okay, sharing part of my story wouldn't be beneficial to me. But, after a while, like I just really stopped being ashamed of that,
Yeah.
just like, hey, this is what it is. And I think that it also empowers me because then I've related to people like,
Yeah.
even just people that I wouldn't even think I relate to. Like, um, they see we have similar life experiences somewhere down the line and
Yeah.
we can connect on that level and such. And so, and then just even just be an example of like showing, one of my heroes is Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington, when he wrote Up from Slavery, like
Hmm.
from being a former slave to being highly educated to, all of the accomplishments that he had, he still recognized, he was still recognized like
He's
where he came from,
super
and
leader.
so he would be that example. So those are kind of just some of the ways I process that.
When you say that, I'm thinking we all have a story. Everybody has a story, and not a lot of people don't bring their story out to the world. But I think if we were to really feel make ourselves vulnerable a little bit and be more open to talk to everybody, we wouldn't have as many issues as we have today, because we all came from something, right? And I don't know anybody in my world who had a perfect life growing up. We've all made mistakes, we've all taken weird tracks, and however we got back, we got back. But it's there are so many who suppress that and don't grow from it. And
Mm.
to me, there's a real richness in being able to share openly, just be candid, because that's what helps other people feel that it's okay to do that. And I think that's, to me, I just think that that's a very special thing, and I'm very glad that you were so open. I appreciate it. I know you differently now. Can't
Yeah,
get
yeah,
away from it, right?
yeah. We make a lot of assumptions,
Oh
about
yeah.
folks, and I've noticed like there's times even where, folks, which we don't never necessarily have to rabbit trail down this trail, but doing DEI tricks, like, there's a lot of assumptions
Mm.
about people and their relation to like DEI. And when I come in to say like, oh yeah, I used to be working a form of law enforcement. I'm friends with police chiefs. Like, you know, uh, sometimes like this how the narratives that we're fed, like, oh, you're either this or that, or you're in this camp or this camp, and we just make assumptions based on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then even when I say like I'm from Oklahoma and grew up with conservative values, like, and it becomes harder for people to like put you in a box, and then they have to learn like, okay, there's nuances
Mm-hmm.
to who we are. Like you can't just sum up, the whole life of someone to one thing, even though our brains typically try to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. I
yeah.
think that's also where you're at by owning that story and sharing that story. It helps others to see where whatever their story is, that they're just at that one point in time, and that there's other things that can come after that.
Yep.
Sometimes when we feel really stuck or feel without hope. I mean, we talk a lot about hope. It's like, how do you actually get hope when you're in the dark places? It's to see people in other places, to be inspired by that. And by sharing that story, I think it does allow people to see themselves in that. It's like, yeah, it's possible. It's not that it was handed to you. You went through challenging times, and you had to work through that.
But what was important, I think, for me to hold on to was the fact that you came from a really good foundation. I mean, a really sound foundation with your mother keeping you in church to keep you, clean and walking a path, right? And a lot of people are that way. They start out that way, and then they stray off that path for a while. But what I think is honorable is that you reconnected. It brought you back. You realized, and you may not have actually realized. You may have done it just as I can't do what I'm doing right now anymore. I need to do something else. But whatever that was that brought you back, I think is that's a big part of the story. It's
Yeah.
resilience, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that, I mean, I think, like, there's a culture, of, there's a lot of history with the Black church and all of that. So there's like a culture within the Black community, and with, going to church on Sunday, wearing your best clothes on Sunday, and there's a culture to that element to it. Um, for me, that's kind of like what I lived. So like I didn't take it serious, when I, kind of strayed away from that foundation. I didn't really connect the dots until like later on, where it was like, oh, I'm kind of being somebody who I'm not, like,
Yeah.
and being able to admit that, like, hey, like, yeah, I was raised in the hood, but my moms wouldn't let me go down to this place here, or to this down this street, or she wouldn't let me go off with certain cousins or friends, because like she knew, like, this wouldn't be the best path. And so even though I was raised in that environment, raised around it and everything, and still kind of have that hood element of me, it's like, okay, the household I was in really shielded me, and shielded me in the midst of it all,
Right.
from like traveling down that path, and everything, even though I went later on. So when I went later on, it was kind of like after I left that lifestyle, where I began to see, like, yeah, I kind of did this by choice. Like, growing up in Washington, yeah, I didn't know how much opportunity was here, and so I moved back to Oklahoma, where there's very less opportunity, and
Yeah.
and more racism, and or, well, I can't say more, but at least more overt
Yeah.
racism and
Good
discrimination and
point.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so, like, then when I came back to Washington with a different mindset, that was focused, and then my eyes were open. I had to go through the struggle for a while, but then my eyes began to be open as these doors were opening for me, as I focused and applied, myself. Because I was always like a smart kid growing up. I was always like some of the top of my class, and everything, and I kind of abandoned that. And so it wasn't until I came back, like, later on, where it's like, okay, let me actually apply myself, and and use these skills and abilities that I have.
Yeah. A return to yourself.
Yeah.
A return to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about those doors you were talking about. I love that metaphor. One of the things that you're doing right now is called the Money Level Show.
Hmm.
And so while this is timely, as we think about the current economic state of our country and our world, this seems more foundational and applicable no matter what's going on. So very applicable now, but it is something that sounds like it would be sustainable. What inspired you to choose this topic? And who's your target audience and why?
Yeah. So what inspired me was the pandemic, COVID 2020. So I had did like some Dave Ramsey class before, and
Financial way.
yeah, the
Yeah.
financial piece,
Yeah.
and a friend had paid for it for me. And this was like back in 2017, 2018, and I did that class, and I ended up getting focused, and I felt like my financial life was getting in order, but it was kind of like you know uh, like folks that are trying to get out of an addiction. Like when you just cut yourself off cold turkey, like you just like you have these desires to go back, and so I was addicted to like spending and consuming, right? And so I went cold turkey, cut off everything, and then Dave Ramsey's like eat rice and beans, and I was just like, yeah, this ain't fun. and so and so then I ended up my wife and I we got to a good place financially, and then we ended up just regressing and kind of relapsing back into like just the consumer lifestyle. And so COVID hit, and um, during that time, I mean, just all the news headlines and everything, where many people were losing jobs and everything. And at my job, I was working in juvenile probation, and I was we weren't meeting with our kids in person. Like we were meeting on like FaceTime on the phone, and it was just like chaos, just trying to figure it out. And so it caused a lot of uncertainty. And during that time, I had zero in my bank account. Um, had debt. Wasn't we owned a house. That was a positive. Um, and I just felt like I couldn't take care of my family if things were to get worse. And so at that time, I felt like irresponsible as like a husband and a father. So we were like reading some books at the job, and I had the book Rich Dad Poor Dad on my
Mm.
bookshelf.
Mhm.
My former landlord had gave it to me some years ago, and so I just decided to pick it up. And so I read the book, and the book just like the scales like fell off my eyes, and it was just like, wow, like I never knew this. I never knew how to make money or how to get out of the rat race, how to, you know, do all of that. So that took me down a journey of the author Robert Kiyosaki, um, which this is like one of the top best-selling books, and I'm actually now connected with folks that are friends with Robert Kiyosaki,
Oh,
and
cool.
he speaks at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. He usually comes and um, speaks there. So the guy I work with, he's friends with him. I I started watching his YouTube channel, and then he was interviewing some folks that were not like traditional financial media. These weren't folks like CNBC or Fox Business. Like these were like independent, well-known voices in the space, and so I began to learn about like macroeconomics and
Mm.
you know uh, gold, stocks, and cryptocurrencies and all these different assets. And so from watching like the guests on his podcast, I started just going down the rabbit hole of just watching all of these guests, and I was just soaking in the knowledge, soaking it up. And it got to the point where I was having these 2 3 hour conversations with my friends, and just breaking stuff down about like, okay, what's the quantitative easing, how does this relate to this, how does this ultimately get to affect our money or whatever. And I was like, this is unsustainable. I can't, my friends, they got families and stuff, they can't sit there and have these conversations for like 2 3 hours all the time. So I just decided like, oh, I'm gonna start a podcast. And so that was in October of 2020 when I started the Money Level show. And so
Mm.
yeah, I mean, it's been a grind from there. So that was like kind of the start of me getting into investing and such.
Wow. It's funny that the pandemic sparked a lot of things, right? and especially when we were stuck at home. It's funny you mentioned that particular book. I actually I read that book when it first came out, and I thought, wow, this is so cool, but it's like so beyond me, right? And I gave that book to my cousin, who's like now a gajillionaire. I mean, he's like, he just went to town with it. He got it. He bought it hook, line, and sinker, and he started going through different financial avenues to learn what he was ultimately going to be doing. And now he's like a financial advisor. So it's pretty amazing. He's actually a newly retired financial advisor, actually. But yeah, that's actually a really good book, I thought. I did not get it when I read it, though.
Hmm.
It was
Yeah, yeah.
beyond me.
One of the top bestsellers in a lot of languages and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's
So you asked this question of your audiences, and as I try to unravel my own responses, what would you say are the biggest financial challenges facing people in the U.S. today? And how do demographic factors such as race, gender, age, location play a role in these challenges?
yeah. Uh, biggest economic issues, challenges, I think, are um, a few things. Well, a lot of things, but a few things that I'll pinpoint. One is real wages has not kept up with inflation since the '70s when Nixon took us
Mm-hmm.
off the gold standard. So that's one piece where money used to be backed by gold, and there used to be a there used to have to be fiscal responsibility by governments because they couldn't print as much money or more money than they had in gold reserves, and so that tie with the gold window definitely in the '70s you begin to see like charts where real wages, which are um, uh, the wage that you make nominally that goes up minus inflation. So
Mm.
if like sometimes people factor in nominal wages, they'll think of like, okay, well in the '70s you got paid $3 to $6 an hour or whatever, but now you're getting paid 30, let's say. Um, but you have to factor in inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how much was a house back in the '70s versus now? How much
Right.
was how many how many kids are how big is a family you could provide for off those wages in the '70s versus making it $30 an hour now? And so so typically folks will look at the nominal numbers and not look at the real adjusted numbers for inflation. So that's one big piece. Another piece is that the wealth gap has increased significantly uh, between the haves and the have-nots. Um, a lot of this is due to, um, you know, a lot of it's due to the globalization, which we could argue
Mm.
is a positive thing, right? It's positive, trade is positive and such. But globalization also came at a cost. There was trade-offs, and a lot of those trade-offs were hollowing out like our industrial base. So you had many of the jobs, manufacturing jobs and such, that left Michigan and many of those Midwest areas. And then CEOs were able to get slave labor cheap, pennies on a dollar versus having to pay Americans, stuck up Americans,
Mm-hmm.
like livable wages, right? And having to deal with unions and stuff, right? And so like, um, so when you see like the expansion of globalization, you begin to see the increase in the wealth gap there, where if you were having to pay an American worker $20 an hour, but then you could pay a Chinese or Indonesian worker $2 an hour, like
Yeah.
that creates a lot of profit for you, and so and you don't have to deal with as much regulations and all of that. So that's created a lot of issues in society. Uh, Another issue is the amount of deficit and debt that is accumulating at an extreme pace. Um, so do you all know where the national debt was at 2000, the year 2000?
I don't think I did. I don't
No.
know what the national debt was.
It
It was
was under five trillion, under 5 trillion.
really. Oh my
Now it's at
gosh.
37 trillion, over 37 trillion
Yeah.
the last 25 years. So the first 200 years of our country, we had under 5 trillion in debt, and then now we're at 37 trillion. So we surpassed that significantly since the turn of the
It's a
millennium.
lot.
Um, so that's due to multiple factors. One is this is no disrespect to anyone who's a baby boomer out there, um,
Thank you,
but
Darrell.
with the reality too, though.
Yeah.
So this is shared a lot, but there's been a kind of like a generational tension between Gen Z and millennials and baby boomers. A
Hmm.
lot of this is due to um, the baby boomers being the biggest generation coming into the workforce. They were afforded like a lot of credit and such, during the boom years of America. So they came up in the times in America where we were a lot more financially healthy, and they voted in a lot of benefits, as well. Social Security, Medicare, um, tax cuts under Reagan, the housing regulation was deregulated under where baby boomers were in their prime years of buying homes and such, and which we could argue led to like the 2008 bubble, but with the housing crisis. But like, so now you have that, but voted in the benefits, but didn't pay for them. So like those taxes hasn't increased to pay for the amount of benefits that we're
Mm.
promising Americans. So we have 37 trillion on balance sheet liabilities, but we have about 150 trillion off balance sheet. These are all the promises of
Yeah.
Social Security and Medicare, and defense spending and all of that, military pensions, all of that that's promised to each American.
Hmm.
And so, um, and we haven't brought the revenue in. We haven't raised taxes to pay for that. Um, we've just printed the money, and when we print the money, we devalue the currency, because the more currency you put in circulation, the less value it has.
Right.
So that's been a big tension point where many boomers are able to own a home. Many millennials and Gen Z, they're like, we can't even get in one, um, and then this has also been something that was like challenged by um, other folks in the boomer generation, where they were saying like, hey, our grandkids and our kids are going to have to deal with the consequences of the policies we pass. If we pass the policies that benefit us, that money has to come from somewhere. And oftentimes the can was kicked down the road to, okay, well, let's not worry about it now. And then now you have these younger generations coming up where they have to worry about the fiscal situation of the government. And so those are probably some of the biggest issues. And I mean, we haven't even touched on retirement crisis or
Wow.
anything, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that's those are three big ones, and then the retirement one is a huge one as well.
Thinking as you were talking about how things are different now than they were in 2000, in terms of our debt. And now we've got tariffs that are, being imposed on other countries. And we've sent a lot of our stuff to those other countries to be manufactured there. And it's coming back to us and we're paying for it, but they're paying for it too. And it's like, it, I don't know. I'm still, I'm still reeling over that one. I'm not quite sure how I feel about tariffs. I think, perhaps we didn't do it very much in the past and we needed to kind of level set, but I also think that to impose it so high, such high tariffs for people or countries who are not used to having done that in the past. What's the cost for us, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, tariffs. I mean, some people hate to, I don't know if any MAGA folks listening or whatever, but tariffs is a tax, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's a tax. You know, countries that tariffs are imposed on typically raise the prices to the importers, the importing nations. So the companies like Walmart or whoever that's importing the goods from other countries have to pay those higher prices.
Mhm.
Then you have to ask yourself, are the companies, the corporations in America going to swallow that cost, or are they going to pass it on to consumers? They may swallow a little bit, but they may, raise the prices to pass it on to consumers. So it's just another way of taxation. Um, I mean, so like we recently had the big beautiful bill, the big beautiful budget, uh, pass, and they made these tax cuts like permanent and all of that stuff. The tax cuts from 2017, but we didn't have high tariffs like this in Trump's first term. So so it's like the government's giving you a tax cut, but then reaching in your back pocket, with the taxation of the
Taxes.
tariffs because that funding ends up going back to the government. And so, yeah, it's kind of just another bamboozle, trick up the sleeve, rabbit out the hat type thing.
I love hearing him say that, don't you?
Well, my next question is right along that same line. There's so many doom and gloom articles and news coverage about our economy, inflation, unemployment rates, even tariffs that impact individuals and families in our country. Some information covers concerns about the economies in other countries. With this onslaught of potentially misleading information, what advice do you have for listeners to help them stay on track and not lose sight of their own financial goals? What do you suggest for those who are impacted by job loss or dramatic work changes, interest rate increases that impact everyday living expenses? How do you stay essentially, how do you stay on track with your own financial goals in the middle of a lot of uncertainty and chaos?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think a few things. A lot of the doom and gloom I think a lot of it's true. I think it's just about time frames. So when you get folks that are trying to predict the next economic collapse, like we know historically empires rise and fall. Like the United States is not going to be the anomaly in history that, I mean, Rome, you can go to Denmark, you can go to the UK, you can go to Weimar, Germany. You go down the list of all of these empires that have risen and fell. And so that's just a historical fact. However, if I were to say that's going to happen tomorrow, then that's and that's another that's a whole another layer of nonsense, right? So time frames are important to understand when it comes to that type of stuff. I think also one of the big dangers is the financial advice that people get. Like there's a lot of people that get um, scammed or rug pulled. They get into an investment, get rug pulled, or um, things of that nature. And a lot of it has to do with being misinformed um, or miseducated. Another has to do with, I think it's just the human nature of greed. Where like, or sometimes we want to get rich quick and we don't want to play the long game of like
Mhm.
compounding over time, or the act of discipline day after day, week after week. Um, and so sometimes people get into like these Ponzi schemes, and lose a lot of wealth there, and that's like a big one, a huge one that's happening with, I mean, a lot of demographics. Um, so I think that the biggest um, there's multiple ways up the mountain, right? Some people invest in stocks, some people invest in a business, some people run a business, some people invest in real estate. Um, some people are cryptocurrencies, whatever the case may be. Like there's multiple ways up the mountain. I think that the main principles that I would share are owning real assets. So when I say real assets, these are assets that cannot be printed out of thin air.
Mhm.
Real estate, gold. I would argue Bitcoin. That's the only cryptocurrency that I'll argue. Um, you know, uh, some people do fancy art, collectibles, things like that. So there's different ways to store value because the amount of deficits and debt that are going to continuously accumulate um, is going to continue. They're going to print more money and devalue the currency even more. And so, me, I'm a big proponent of gold, which is real money.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and why do I say that? I say that because you have, well, we had the abysmal failure of Doge. I mean, obviously, a lot of people were impacted. Many people lost their jobs. But Elon Musk came in saying he's going to cut 2 trillion of the budget. Um, I'm a I have a mutual friend with David Stockman, who was the director of Office of Management and Budget under Reagan, and he does the math, and he's like, "There's no way," you know.
Mm.
Um, then Doge was counting like these future contracts, like 10 years out, like, "Oh, we canceled this contract, and this is how much we saved Americans," and they claiming that they saved about 250 billion, but really it's probably more like 150 billion. And that's peanuts to like the deficit alone is 2 trillion.
Right.
So you saved 150 billion and you know, they're not going to touch Social Security or Medicare. Like Americans will burn the White House down if their entitlements are touched. These politicians will not get voted back in. So that's one aspect. So like, okay, we have that issue. Um, Military defense spending, and within that, you
Mm.
have veteran benefits and pensions. Right? They're not going to reduce that. And so, like when you look at the numbers, it just shows that okay, you know, uh, in order to keep up with these promises, they're going to have to print more money, which is going to devalue the currency
Mm.
even more. So that's why I say own real assets. The other thing I would say is uh, being disciplined. So obviously, it's good to treat yourself here and there, and have fun and go on a vacation or whatnot. But you also gotta like think it defensively as well, in terms of like, okay, well, it's not just necessarily how much money you make, it's also how much money you keep and how you make that money grow. Are you able to, invest and build some passive income to where you're able to save some of your time and make money in your sleep? Um, things of that nature. And I also think that just kind of getting off from under like the consumer mindset that you have to have the new car, the new iPhone, or the
Mhm.
new this, new that. Like your car is fine, your iPhone's fine, right? It's more important to be thinking defensively when you have these types of dynamics happening, especially in the government. So,
Mm. So, in your program, you list some investment vehicles like stocks, bonds, real estate, like you were just talking about, collectibles and others. What advice would you give people who are just starting out and perhaps juggling student loans, working at lower wages, and just trying to make ends meet, basically, day to day, and don't have a home?
yeah, that's a great question. So one thing is if you're able to make some wages, obviously it depends on circumstance. If you're a single parent, or if you're a single parent with 3 kids, 2 kids, 1 kid, or if you're single, so there's many different factors. But generally, I would say that you have to like bring in more income than if you work a low wage job, you have to bring in more income, and that may mean getting a second job. That may mean picking up a gig job, doing some DoorDash or whatever the case may be. Building you a nest egg, because I think it's about 40% of Americans don't have a $400 emergency expense saved up,
Mm.
and so at least getting to like the point where you can get a $1,000 emergency expense. And again, like when you get that $1,000, don't go get the new iPhone. Like like really, you got to really show some discipline. And so you have to increase your income. That's one piece. The other piece is like creating mechanisms for yourself, savings mechanisms for yourself. So if some people I know are just natural savers, they just like, yeah, they don't need anything and they just save money, and you're just like, dang, you saved up this amount of money, right? That's not me. Like me, I tend to like stop and get something, and all this little stuff just compounds. Or I think I just spent like $200 on Amazon just today, like just getting some stuff for this studio, right? Um, so one for me being that being my personality, one way I manage that is put part of my income where I pay myself first. So whether that be 10%, 5%, whatever, I usually pay 10%. But depending on where you're at, you have to pay yourself first. You have to
Mhm.
uh, kind of get out of the pay my bills and pay the creditor first. Like get pay yourself first. Like creditor come last. Like if I don't have enough to pay the creditor, then I'm gonna have to get out there and deliver some pizzas or something to pay the creditor. But my rule is to pay myself first. Um, and then I also put some of my wealth in gold, which is um, hedge against inflation as well as a hedge against chaos and human stupidity. So
Mm.
I put my wealth in gold, which is harder to liquidate. I mean, you can obviously go to a coin dealer or sell it or whatever. But for me, the people that I've done business with, like I have to pack it, ship it, tape the box up, make sure nobody take it, steal it from, USPS or whatever. Um, and I have to, do all this extra stuff, print the label. And it's just a lot more steps and barriers for me to like sell that gold versus like taking my credit card or my
Right.
debit card and just going and swiping really quick. So gold helps me save, and I allocate some to like that or silver, just to get my money out of the paper dollars that's losing value and put it into like a commodity that's keeping its purchasing power. So one thing about gold,
Yeah.
like why I say gold, over 100 years ago, you could buy an ounce of gold for $20. If you were to travel back in time, buy an ounce of gold, bury that $20 and bury that ounce of gold, travel back to the future to today, that ounce of gold is $3,700.
Right.
That $20 is still $20, and it doesn't buy you as much as it would have over 100 years ago. So, understanding that the money that we make is losing value, is losing purchasing power, is like a key point that people should understand. And so
Mm.
that's one reason why, I try not to. I mean, obviously, I keep my emergency fund and may get like well, this is another point, right? Um, People are lazy, right? So people will keep their money in JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America, earning 0.002%. And there were banks, when the Fed raised interest rates recently, there were banks that were paying 5% interest. And it's like, okay, well, JP Morgan, these big banks, they robbing you. I think they robbed, well, not robbed, but just, in quotations, robbed
Mm.
people out of like $600 billion. And it's like, okay, yeah, you could have bought a CD or parked that money in somewhere else and got like 5% on your money, and how your money making money for you. But for the sake of like convenience, or either lack of education or convenience,
Yeah.
people wouldn't like do make that step, so that's kind of like another point.
I've got the last question, don't I?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
It's a gift. I gave her a gift.
And before I actually dive into that, when the next question is going to be, what's next for you? I wanted to, like, we talk a lot about hope, and our audience is primarily leaders. And so when you think about leaders and you think about all we've talked about today, and we think about hope, how might this help them, this information? How might this help them to be more hopeful
Hmm.
about the future, or how they can help their teams or even themselves, as we think about this really important concept around money?
Hmm. Yeah. So I would approach it from this way. So some of the approach that question from this way. So some of the biggest like generous people that I know, one would be billionaire Rick Rule, another would be billionaire Frank Justra, um, and I've also met billionaire Robert Friedland, who was Steve Jobs' roommate in college. Um, and so Rick Rule, he's been a mentor of mine, and so he gives his time, and he's actually starting a bank right now that actually pay you interest on your money. It's
Wow.
called Battle Bank, but it opens up in October 1st. It's been like a long regulatory process, but
What's it called?
Battle Bank.
Battle Bank. Oh,
They want to battle for your money. You can hold real estate in your IRA. You can take loans out against your precious metals, all type of stuff. It's pretty cool. But so Rick, I've been to his house. He's uh, normal guy. He doesn't wear fancy stuff. He drives regular cars, immaculate house. But he invests his time, in me. He gives his time. He'll come on my show, or he invited me down to his conference where I started meeting like Robert Friedland and some of these um, other well-known figures in the financial industry. And same thing with Frank Juster. I had a chance to interview him on my show in July. He's Frank Juster is a billionaire that made his money through the mining sector, but he was also the co-founder of Lionsgate Films. That produced Hunger Games, John Wick, some of these big, huge box office movies. And him and we talked, and he's big into philanthropy. He's big into working on global hunger crisis um, and refugee crises and conflict, global conflict, international conflict. I think he's on the international crisis board or whatnot, and I think he's friends with the Clintons, and I think he was maybe have some role with the Clinton Foundation. But when I think of that, when I see that, they're not like these like money hungry, just like give me money. Like they like to make money, but they give a lot of it away, And so when I think about giving back and hope, I think about being in position to whether you give your time to someone or give your resources. There's many nonprofits that can use your support. Um, I sit on two boards, one for Coffee Oasis and also another Alta Vista, which is an organization that works with kids with special needs. Um, and so I sit on multiple boards, you know, um, and I think we need more of that, especially in this toxic, environment, in this toxic society. We need people that are willing to give, and to help out and for me, like building wealth is like, yeah, I want to be rich, but I don't want a new car. I drive a 2007 Subaru, and I got the most wealth I've ever built in my life. But I do want to support my friend who's doing work for a sports ministry, and nonprofit that works with kids and does sports programs for kids. Like, okay, I want to give my money to that. So, I want to give my money to like organizations that are doing the hard work of supporting our communities, supporting folks through mental health or through special that have special needs. I have a daughter that's on the autism spectrum. Um, you know, um, and so these causes are very important. And so I think that being in position to be able to donate to these causes and to help out, to volunteer, to be involved, and a lot of that comes from my social work background too. And so I think those are ways that people can spread hope and not get stagnant and not
Mm-hmm.
get so caught up into the chaos that's happening in our society, and actually be part of like solutions and support their local communities.
Like that.
Yeah,
Very
love
good.
that. All right. So I know you juggle a very busy schedule. You've got a lot of different things going on. So what's next for you? What's coming up for you that you're really excited about?
What's next? Right now, I just made a big move with joining the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference channel, and so next for that would be attending the conference in Vancouver, Canada, and facilitating some of the panels with folks like Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, and
Wow. Yeah.
Frank Justrom, and folks that are of that scale. And so for me, I grew up like, I'm from the South, so like I had a slur. I didn't talk the best. I used to just People used to make fun of my accent and everything, and it took a lot of work to kind of like, I guess, assimilate to some degree to like in communication and learning how to communicate to multiple different audiences. And so to be on this platform, like I'm like one of the few, if not the only, black person that's facilitating, with this particular sector. A lot of it's mining and such, which are traditionally older white male. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so being able to create pathways there, um, and being able to introduce those pathways to my friends and folks that I engage with, as well as being able to participate and facilitate some of these panels with some of the like high profile figures. I think that's going to be a next big step for me. And so, yeah, so that's probably something that I'm looking forward to.
Wow.
Great.
And that's in addition to having a day job.
Yeah.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
I'm looking forward to my kids. Just being
Yeah.
able to engage with them and see them grow and be involved. And not be so busy to where like I miss out on uh, important moments in their
Mm-hmm.
lives and such. And so yeah, so even through all the busyness, like I'm always like prioritizing like family and things, and just trying to balance it all.
Well, we are so happy that you took the time to come to into our world and be on our podcast. You are one of very few people who are going to be in this series, and we just knew we had to have you. You have a wonderful perspective. I love learning about your story, but also how you've grown your financial world, not your wealth necessarily, but certainly what you've been able to share with the rest of the world about how you make sense of it. And in fact, talking to you makes it make sense more. So I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at work.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes. Be sure to let me know when the episode comes out. I'll be sure to share that with some folks, and
yes, we definitely
whoever
want
wants
that. And
this, this guy.
we'll have you all over social media. So there you go. Thank you so
So
much, Darrell.
Darrell, where can people find you? How can they follow what you're doing?
Yeah, so on YouTube, I have two channels, VRIC Media for Vancouver Resource Investment Conference Media. That's where I um, host the show for the conference, and then also have my own channel on YouTube, which is the Money Levels Show, levels
Mm-hmm.
plural. Um, Also put out content there. I'm on, Instagram, X, and multiple different aspects. If you want to listen to my music, you can look up
Oh,
Darrell on the Spotify. It's Darrell space Dominic Dominic.
Ooh,
So sometimes I still get the urge to put out some music and such, and so I still do
nice.
that.
Yeah.
It's actually it's on more than Spotify. It's on Apple Music and other platforms too. But um,
oh, I'll be listening. I'm a Spotify nut, and I love hip hop, and I love Afro beats. So
nice,
I'll be there.
nice, yes. So yeah, those are the places you can find me, and yeah, anyone can reach out to me anytime.
Great.
Thank you so
All right.
much,
Thank you
Darrell.
again for
This has
being
been
on the
fun.
show.
All right, thank you all.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Wow, that was really great. I'm glad that we had Darrell on. He's really so knowledgeable about so many things. I've only known him for maybe about a year, and I find his approach to everything is really fascinating. He's got that demeanor that people want to know, and people just want to connect with him. And so I really appreciated he took some time for us, because I know he's busy. But,
I think the theme too that I kept hearing is that it's important to give back.
Yes.
Yeah. So when we think about rich from the perspective of money, and I'm sure he would agree with us that when we think about being rich, there's so many other aspects of that, right? Not just money, but money. We need money to survive, but we also need to think about it from the perspective is how do we give back?
Yes.
And he's been giving back his whole life, and I think that was fun to hear about, both in money, but he's also gives back with his time.
Yeah, and what I kind of took away from that also was that, when you have something, if you have wealth, and it doesn't mean a ton of wealth. Wealth can be anything, right? But when you have enough money that you are not struggling yourself all the time, it's easier to see beyond yourself and to see what the needs are outside. So it's probably, there are a lot of people who don't have anything and they give away as well. However, I'd say that the people who have enough money, it doesn't mean they
Whatever
must have
that
more,
is
more,
for
more,
you.
right? Whatever is enough, then that gives them the capacity from that point on to be able to be generous. And whether that's with your time or education or money, it's to me, that's a really cool lesson for people to know that we don't have to be rich to provide for someone else.
Yeah.
We don't. We're rich in heart.
Yeah, right. So. In relationships and
So let's keep that conversation going. If you have questions or comments about the show, you can find us on all our social media channels at lifting_leaders. We have so many exceptional podcast episodes coming up with more fantastic guests. So be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. If you know someone who would find this episode inspiring, share it with them. Text them, email them, or take a screenshot and share it on your Instagram and tag us at lifting_leaders. If you'd like to know more about us, our guests, or the show, please go to our website at liftingleaderspodcast.com. You'll find our show notes there as well. If you're looking for help in developing your leaders or would like a growth opportunity yourself through leader coaching, please contact us at our website at www.liftingleaderspodcast.com. Thank you to Ari Chance Roberts for his technical support of our show. Finally, please take 30 seconds to follow us. It helps you because you never miss an episode, and it helps us because you never miss an episode. To follow us, go to the Lifting Leaders Podcast show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Then just tap the plus sign at the top right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you'll give us a 5-star rating, which would be great, and review, and share the episode with a friend, we would really be grateful. Thank you so much, Crystal, for coming on and having this discussion with Darrell.
Thanks for bringing Darrell to us.
Thank you to all of our listeners for listening and sticking with us. We really do appreciate you. Find ways every day to lift each other up. Take care.
Bye.